When old heroes get adapted for modern audiences, there is always one temptation: make them wounded, make them broken, make them relatable by turning the myth into psychology. We have seen this with Achilles, where the warrior becomes less a symbol of glory and more of a man exhausted by it. We have seen it with King Arthur, where the legendary king is often reshaped into a burdened leader. We have seen it with Robin Hood, where the clean folk hero becomes a symptom of a broken society. Even Hercules is often pulled away from pure myth and turned into a man carrying the cost of violence. And to be clear, that is not always wrong. Odysseus should carry pain. He fought in Troy, he lost men, he wandered for years. He was kept from his home, his wife, his son, and his kingdom. Any version of the Odyssey that treats him like none of that matters would miss something important. But there is another problem on the opposite side. Because Odysseus was never just a broken man. He's not only a soldier trying to get home, he's a strategist, a liar, a survivor, a king, a favorite of Athena, and one of the most dangerous minds in Greek myth. That is also what makes him difficult to adapt. Keep him too distant and he's just a myth. But if you make him too modern, too wounded, too easy to explain, you can end up shrinking him into something much smaller than Homer's Odysseus. So with Nolan's The Odyssey, it is not enough for the movie to understand his pain. It also has to understand the full man beneath it. Now, I won't take too much of your time. Just give me a few minutes and I'll explain why Odysseus was never just a trauma story. The reason this matters is because trauma has become one of the easiest ways to modernize an old hero. And sometimes that can reveal something real. A hero comes back from war, he cannot fully explain what happened to him, he carries memories other people cannot understand, he wants peace, but violence has shaped him. He wants to return to ordinary life, but ordinary life no longer fits the same way. That can absolutely apply to Odysseus. But if that becomes the whole thing, then something important gets lost. Because Odysseus is not only a man being shaped by suffering, he is constantly acting back against it. He studies each situation he enters, he watches people before he trusts them, he hides what he feels, he chooses when to speak, when to lie, when to wait, and when to reveal himself. That is why reducing him to trauma can feel too small. It makes him easier to understand, but not necessarily more accurate. Because Homer's Odysseus is not just wounded by the world, he is also trying to master it. His pain matters, but pain alone is not enough to define him. Odysseus is strong, but his strength is not only physical. In fact, if Odysseus were only strong, he would probably be dead long before he ever reached Ithaca. What separates him is not that he can overpower every obstacle, it is that he knows when he cannot. You see that again and again in the way he handles danger. When Odysseus and his crew land on the island of the Lotus-Eaters, he sends men ahead to find out who lives there. The people they meet offer them lotus to eat, and once they do, the men lose all desire to return home. They forget Ithaca, forget the journey, and only want to stay. When Odysseus sees what happened, he does not hesitate. He forces the affected men back to the ships, ties them down so they cannot escape, and orders the crew to leave at once. That is not a man simply being dragged through suffering. That is a man recognizing danger before it spreads. When he reaches Circe, he faces a different kind of danger. His men enter her house, accept her food, and are turned into animals. Odysseus does not simply rush in like a conventional warrior. With Hermes' warning and protection, he enters prepared, resists her magic, and forces the situation to change. Only then does he negotiate with her. The danger now becomes an alliance. And when he faces the Sirens, he does not defeat temptation by pretending he is above it. He knows what they are. He knows their song pulls sailors to their death. And he knows he may not be able to resist them. So, he builds a system around his own weakness. He orders his men to fill their ears with wax so they cannot hear the song. Then he has them tie him to the mast of the ship with strict orders not to release him no matter what he says. When they finally pass the Sirens, Odysseus hears the song and begs to be freed, but his men ignore him and bind him even tighter until the danger has passed. And when he finally returns to Ithaca, he does not storm into his house shouting that the king has returned. He enters as a beggar. He hides his name, he watches, he tests the servants, he tests the suitors, he studies the room before he reveals himself. That is Odysseus. Again and again he survives because the first answer is not always force. Sometimes the answer is disguise. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is patience. Sometimes it is a lie. Sometimes it is letting the enemy believe they understand you before you show them they never did. His intelligence is survival intelligence. It is the kind that comes from knowing that one wrong word can kill you, one wrong boast can curse you, one moment of impatience can destroy everyone around you. So much of Odysseus is built around control. Control of language, control of identity, control of timing, control of what other people are allowed to know about him. And that is why he can be heroic and unsettling at the same time. Because the same qualities that make him survive also make him difficult to fully trust. Odysseus wins because he can adapt faster than the world can destroy him. His pain matters, but his mind is the weapon. The clearest example of this is the Cyclops, because the story of Polyphemus is not just Odysseus outsmarting a monster. It is the moment where his greatest strength and his greatest weakness sit right next to each other. When Odysseus and his men enter the Cyclops cave, they are trapped by something they cannot defeat directly. Polyphemus is too strong. He blocks the entrance with a stone they cannot move. He eats Odysseus' men in front of him. And at first, the obvious heroic answer would be revenge. Kill the monster. But Odysseus understands something important. If they kill Polyphemus too early, they will still be trapped inside the cave, because only the Cyclops is strong enough to move the stone from the entrance. So Odysseus has to think past the immediate desire for violence, and that is where the plan begins. He gives Polyphemus wine, he lets the Cyclops become drunk, and when Polyphemus asks for his name, Odysseus gives him one of the most important lies in the entire poem. He says his name is nobody. That lie is not just a trick. It is Odysseus understanding how language itself can become a weapon. Because when Polyphemus is blinded by Odysseus and his men, he screams for help from the other Cyclops nearby. They ask him who is hurting him, and Polyphemus can only answer that nobody is attacking him, so they leave him. That is the brilliance of Odysseus. He wins because brute strength is not the only kind of power. A name can be power, a lie can be power, timing can be power, letting the enemy misunderstand his own situation can be power. And then comes the weakness. Because once he escapes, once the danger has passed, he cannot live as nobody. He has to reclaim his identity. So from the ship, he shouts back his real name. He wants Polyphemus to know who defeated him. He wants the victory attached to him. He wants his name restored. And that one act changes everything, because Polyphemus is the son of Poseidon. Once he knows Odysseus' name, he can pray to his father and call down the curse that will make the journey home even harder. That is why the Cyclops story matters so much. It does not show Odysseus as a simple genius. It shows the contradiction inside him. He is clever enough to survive by becoming nobody, but proud enough to ruin that protection by needing everyone to know he was Odysseus. That is not just a character flaw added to make him relatable. That is the shape of the man. His intelligence saves him, his pride exposes him. And any adaptation that only sees the pain of Odysseus but not this dangerous mixture of brilliance and ego is missing one of the most important things about him. And this is also why the gods matters. Odysseus belongs to a mythic world where gods watch, interfere, punish, protect, delay, and redirect human lives. Poseidon hates him because of what happens to Polyphemus. Calypso keeps him from home. Hermes helps him when he has to face Circe. Zeus allows the journey to move forward, but the most important divine relationship is Athena. Athena does not favor Odysseus because he is innocent or morally superior, and she definitely does not favor him because he is simply wounded and deserves comfort. She favors him because he is the kind of human being who speaks her language. Athena is not only the goddess of wisdom in some abstract sense, she is connected to strategy, practical intelligence, controlled warfare, craft, disguise, and the ability to win without always using brute force. And that is Odysseus. He survives by doing the exact things Athena represents, thinking before striking, disguising himself when power is not enough, waiting for the right moment, and turning intelligence into a weapon. That is why Athena's favor tells us something important about him. Athena is looking at him as a rare mind, a man of calculation, a man of disguise, a man who can suffer and still plan, a man who can be brought low and still remain dangerous. That does not mean Odysseus is perfect. His pride angers Poseidon. His men die partly because human beings keep failing divine warnings. His journey is not just a road home. It is a world of divine pressure, punishment, temptation, and judgment. So Odysseus being favored by Athena marks him as someone exceptional enough to be watched by the gods, helped by them, tested by them, and still punished when his own nature turns against him. That is the version of Odysseus an adaptation has to understand. Not a man separated from myth so he can become easier to explain, but a man whose intelligence, danger, pride, and suffering are all large enough to pull the gods into his story. And this becomes especially clear when Odysseus finally gets home, because the return to Ithaca is not just a personal reunion. It is not only about a husband coming back to his wife. It is not only about a father coming back to his son. It is definitely not just a wounded man finally finding emotional closure. The homecoming is political. By the time Odysseus returns, his house has been occupied by men who behave as if his absence has erased his authority. The suitors are not just annoying guests. They are eating through his wealth, they are pressuring his wife, they are humiliating his son. So when Odysseus comes back, he returns as a king whose place has been challenged. That is why the slaughter of the suitors matters. It is brutal, it is frightening, but it's not random violence. It is restoration through blood. Odysseus is not simply saying, I have suffered and now I need peace. He is saying, this is my house, this is my wife, this is my son, this is my name. And anyone who tried to replace me while I was gone will pay for it. That is why Odysseus cannot be reduced to a damaged man limping back into domestic life. His return changes the political reality of Ithaca. He does not just come home, he reclaims the home by force. The husband, the father, the king, and the killer all arrive at the same time. And if an adaptation only understands the sadness of that return, but not the power struggle beneath it, then it misses why Odysseus' homecoming still feels so severe. And even then, Ithaca is not the complete end. That is one of the strangest and most important details in the Odyssey. Before Odysseus even gets home, Tiresias tells him that after he returns, after he deals with the suitors, after he restores order in his house, He will still have something left to do. He must leave again. He has to take an oar and travel inland, away from the sea, until he reaches people who know nothing about ships or sailing. And the sign that he has reached the right place will be someone looking at the oar on his shoulder and mistaking it for a tool used to separate grain. A winnowing fan. That is where Odysseus must stop. That is where he must make offerings to Poseidon. And that detail matters because it means the return to Ithaca is not a simple full stop. The burden of being Odysseus still follows him. There is still a debt to the gods. There is still a consequence to what happened on the journey. So the return home, the reunion with his family, and the restoration of order matter, but none of it turns him into an ordinary man. And that is another reason reducing him to a trauma story feels too small, because trauma stories often move towards healing, closure, and the possibility of finally being whole. But Odysseus shows that home can be part of the journey itself, not necessarily the end of it. And that is the problem with making Odysseus only a wounded man. It is not that the pain is wrong, but pain is not enough to contain him, because even while he suffers, he keeps thinking and adapting. That is what makes him fascinating. The closer you look, the more difficult he becomes. He is a husband trying to return to his wife, a father trying to return to his son, a king trying to reclaim his house, a liar who survives through disguise, a warrior who restores order through blood, a man favored by Athena, hated by Poseidon, tested by the gods, and still carrying a burden even after he reaches home. So if Nolan's The Odyssey wants to understand Odysseus, it cannot only ask what broke him, it has to ask what remained. What kind of mind survived the breaking? What kind of a man come back? And what does it mean when that man is not only wounded but intelligent, proud, dangerous, political, and still impossible to fully reduce? That is the real challenge of adapting Odysseus. The challenge of making him human without making him smaller than he is. In the previous video, I talked about whether Ithaca can still be the home after 20 years, but this question sits beside it. What kind of man is actually coming back? Because Odysseus was never just a trauma story. He was the man who wanted home, but could not be contained by it. And if the movie understands that, then his return to Ithaca will not feel like the end of a wound. It will feel like the return of one of the most complicated men in myth. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of my future videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.